Hey, what's up, everybody? My name's Carlos,
Hi, I'm Ace.
and this is the Until Midland Loves Jesus podcast. It's kind of been in our hearts
Yeah.
and our minds for a while,
Mm,
and man, we get caught up in the little things like, what are we gonna call it,
right.
and what's it gonna look like? And
I've been meaning to start a podcast since I was 15,
there you
and
go.
I still haven't decided the name. So here
Here
we
it
are.
is.
Here we
Here it
are.
is. Some of you are probably like, okay, well, what is it gonna be?
Mm,
Let me just go ahead and straight tell you, I have no clue.
yeah. No
I
idea.
have no idea. What I do know is on this podcast, it was kind of inspired. Shout out Pastor Braden too. He'll be a part of it, but um, man, we just have so many conversations. I
Yeah.
even think we were having one before we turned the camera on,
Yeah. Yeah.
where you were talking about communion and kind
Right.
of what you're wrestling with right now, and it just gets us into these long Bible
Yeah.
conversations. And we just said, man, we need to start recording these and
Right.
just push record.
Just push record.
And so, yeah, go.
Yeah. I think we get caught in the particulars too many times where it's like, I mean, even before we hit record, it's like, should we have this there, that there, and it's just like, I think we just go. And I think we've talked about it before. I think the heart of this podcast will be like, man, I'm in a position where I'm like trying to learn, and just really hear and understand and like I guess develop and be discipled.
Yeah,
And I feel like you've been that guy in my life, where if I have a question, I come and talk to you about it. And I think many times I'm just kind of like talking through it, and you
yeah,
just sit there and you listen to me. And I feel like sometimes I kind of answer myself, and you're just like,
there it
yeah,
is.
there it is. But there's other times where, you know, I think you've had to like disciple me and correct me, and you've never done that in like a non-gracious way. And so I think that's one of the many reasons why I'm like, man, I want to have a podcast with this guy so we can talk through things that
Wow.
and questions. Like I feel like there's questions that we get asked all the time, even by people in our church,
Yeah,
and we just want to talk about those things, because sometimes you can't address that in the 5-minute conversation that you
right.
have on a Sunday morning. So yeah,
Awesome.
that's where we're
Awesome.
at.
Yeah, so that's going to be one side of it. Just
Right.
us talking,
Yeah.
quote unquote, Bible,
Yeah.
talking, quote unquote, church culture,
Mm.
um, phenomenons that are going on in
Right.
churches. I could even forecast this podcast, some episodes being really deep,
Yeah.
and praise God for those. But
Right.
I think also we'll have some episodes, dude, that'll be chill and
Fun.
funny, and
Yeah.
maybe our wittiness will come
For
out,
sure.
and some people on here only get to see me and you
Yeah.
from a stage, and so
Right.
they don't get to see the times where we're joking and
Yeah.
laughing and having good times, and
Yeah.
so I'm really excited. So that'll be one part of the
Mm.
podcast, and then obviously the name of it is Until Midland Loves
Mm.
Jesus, and so we're gonna bring stories on here, man.
Yeah.
We're gonna call real stories, and that's actually what this one's gonna be to start off, because I think it's really important that the Scripture tells us that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of
Mm.
our testimony,
Yeah.
and so there's power in testimony because ultimately, the testimony, the the peak of it, if you
Yeah.
will, is Jesus.
Right.
He changed my life,
Yeah.
and that's what our church is about. We exist to point real people to a real Jesus with a real love until Midland loves Jesus. And
Yeah.
so I'm actually excited. That means it's not just going to, if you know anything, uh, I pastor a church here in Midland, Texas called Real Church, and Ace has been a part. He's part-time staff here at our church on the worship team.
Yeah.
Tell us apart what your roles are.
Yeah. So I help on the worship team on Sunday mornings, and then I lead worship on Wednesday nights for our youth. Um, and then I'm also helping with like media production Sunday mornings. I've been kind of like these last few weeks just kind of on Sunday mornings, like wherever there's a fire, you can put it out
Yeah.
kind of thing. And it's
We
not
call those
often.
culture carriers.
Right.
There you go.
And so I'm just kind of wherever I'm needed. I feel like that's always been my heart. Ever since coming to Real Church, I've been like, dude, wherever you need me,
Yeah.
here's what I'm good at. Here's, if that helps in any way.
Yeah.
And yeah. So
And keep it real too. What's your favorite part that you get to play a role in?
I think I really like.
No, I'm saying you didn't list it, bro.
And I'm also on the preaching team.
Let's
I
go.
feel
He's
like
on the preaching team.
That's that middle child syndrome coming out where I just like I think I try not to draw too much attention. Um, but yeah, I really enjoy, I guess, teaching and preaching, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to be more honest about stuff like that. Where, like,
Yeah.
I like doing this.
Yeah.
I used to think it was like a humble brag, but no, I think I really
It's an
enjoy that.
honor.
It is, and it's an honor, and I mean, there's definitely a weight to it, but I mean, I really enjoy it, and it might not look like it on Sunday mornings because I'm like, dude, I'm freaking out, up until the point where I'm up there. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
it's an honor.
Awesome. So yeah, that's kind of going to be the double-sided sword, if you will, of this podcast. Church, Bible, all things Christianity,
Yeah.
and then hearing people's stories. And so, let me finish by telling you, and it's just not people in our church. Man, I was telling you this morning, I got to do a chapel at Midland Christian,
Yeah.
and this young kid came up to me and started sharing his story and his journey with the Lord. And I was like, I was like, dude, I'm starting a podcast, and this would be amazing because right now he's not a part of our church.
Right.
He's just a guy in our city who loves Jesus, and that's what our church is about.
Yeah.
We're just about our city and reaching them for Jesus. And so, man, what we really hope is that this podcast is supplemental to you. We hope it builds your faith. We hope it encourages you. And so, yeah, let's jump in, dude.
Yeah.
I really think it's important for you guys that are watching, every week, people in church, they see people on the platform,
Right.
and they think immediately, I feel like they put expectations, they put ideas, they have these thoughts about us
Right.
because we're on a platform of, oh man, these people are perfect.
Right.
These people are holy. Like, I can't have a relationship with Jesus like they do,
Right.
or I hope to have a relationship with Jesus like they do. When we're pretty honest here, where we say, man, there's nothing. We're just gifted differently.
Yeah.
We're gifted differently, and so I want to unpack that about you, dude, because we're going on what 3 solid years of, you said it, just discipleship,
Yeah.
friendship, even.
Yeah.
And many people just see Ace on the stage, and
Right.
we kind of want to learn about Ace off the stage
Yeah.
today. And so talk to us, bro. Tell us a little bit about your background and your family.
Yeah. So I said it earlier, but I'm like one of the middle children of 4 of us. So it's
Okay.
my older sister, my older brother, me, and then my little sister. And we're all in our 20s now. I think my little sister will be 21 and in July. And so yeah, ever since she's been born, we're 4 days apart. So
Oh wow.
ever since she's been born, my birthday's been about her. So I love you, Mom. But no, I know I'm kidding. But it's been cool to grow up in that environment. I think man, we're really close as siblings. Like even as a family, like we're just tight knit. But yeah, born and raised in Midland. It's kind of crazy. The house that I'm at now, because I live with my mom and my siblings still, and I didn't know this, but when you moved to Midland, you were like 3 houses down,
Yeah.
and that was, it was wild to think about. That was like what, 2015?
I lived in an apartment for the first year, so it was about 2016
Okay.
that I lived across the street,
Yeah,
2 houses down,
yeah.
and we had
wild.
no idea.
No idea. No, I
Which
always
real
felt
church didn't exist
right.
at that point, so
Yeah, and I always felt an anointing somewhere over there, but had no idea who it was.
it was the guy on the motorcycle.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother
Okay,
podcast for a
yeah.
whole nother story.
Yeah, that's you. I didn't even know you rode a bike. That's
Yeah.
crazy. But yeah, born and raised here in Midland. And honestly, I feel like my story's been one that I can just see like the hand of the Lord. I mean, ever since I was a child, all the way until now. Like,
Yeah.
and so I grew up in the church. I remember like one of my earliest memories is like getting in trouble for running around at church. Like I was like probably like 3, and
Wow.
I was yeah, born and raised in the church, and
And to put some perspective on it, you said you remember at 3 being in church, and tell the people how old you are now.
I am 24, about to be 25.
Okay, and
Yeah.
you've been in church pretty consistently your entire life.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I used to go. We had Sundays, Sunday afternoons, Wednesdays, and then Friday youth. And so
Man.
just,
When the doors were open, you were there.
yeah, the
Yeah.
doors were open. I was there. And I really appreciate a lot of that part of my life because I think it really gave me a foundation for like, I guess my belief and my faith that I have now. And even seeing like my parents, who, you know, when I was a little kid, my dad was in a band, in a Christian band, and
Okay.
so, and I remember just like his faith being a real big part of his life. He was a man of his convictions and a man who like, you know, I mean, we weren't allowed to listen to secular music. We weren't allowed to like, you know, watch secular movies. Like it was like he was very much about I think well-meaning, wanting us to follow Jesus and like, I look back now and I'm like, dang dude, like I can't watch Happy Feet, bro. But it was like, it was I respect that part about him a lot now because I think it taught me like one of the lessons that he taught me was like, yo, if you're gonna be about something, like be about it, you know.
Man, that's awesome. I
And
like that.
he was like, either you're all the way in or you're all the way out, like. And I think sometimes that do or die mentality can sometimes it can be harmful, but I think I definitely see the well-intentioned like I guess mentality he had there of like, man, follow Jesus
Yeah.
with all your heart. And one of the things he still tells me now is like, don't let go, like,
Yeah.
don't give up on God, like he's never going to give up on you. And so um I grew up in that sort of home where it was very strict. I think my dad was very strict. And I mean, I appreciate it now.
Right.
I didn't then. I was
Right.
like, yo, this guy is
Yeah.
mean. But I think now I can see like, man, he was just trying to take care of us, trying to take care of
Absolutely.
his kids. Um, but so I remember just all throughout my childhood, going to church every time it was open. And right around maybe 13 or 14, I, we went to like a youth camp, and I feel like I really encountered the Lord at that time. And I guess to rewind, I guess it was like I was 7 or 8 years old, and there was like one of those heaven and hell plays in town. I
Yeah.
don't know if you
Oh
ever
yeah.
been to one of those.
They scare you.
It was
They
scary.
They scare the hell out of you,
Yeah,
if you will.
they want to scare you into heaven.
Yeah, there
right?
you go.
And
Which is a bad tactic.
bad tactic. I think the Lord can.
That's a podcast one day.
Right. I think the Lord can draw straight lines with a crooked pencil. So, I think that's what happened there.
Yeah.
Where I remember just hearing at the end they gave a gospel presentation, which was like, "You don't want to go to hell, don't you?" And I was like, "No, right?" Like, I
No.
was like, "Of course not." Like, and so, I remember being really scared, but then also just feeling like, man, I have to go up there. I don't know. At 8 years old,
Yeah.
and I
That
don't
was
know
here
if-
in Midland.
Yeah, that was here in Midland.
Where at?
I think it was at the Alamo Baptist.
Okay. Shout out Alamo Baptist.
Yeah, I think that's where it was. I remember because it was like right next to Doug Russell. That's how I remember
Okay.
that. And I went up and I gave my life to the Lord. I as best as I knew how at 8 years old, right? Like just
Right.
a sincere prayer of like, God, I want to go to heaven with you. I don't want to go to hell. And I think that was like a real turning point of where like I met the Lord.
Yeah.
I didn't really know him all too well yet, but I definitely feel like that was a turning point in my life where I don't know. I feel like I kind of like woke up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, kind of lived my life throughout that. And then at 13, 14, we went to a youth camp, and I feel like I really encountered the presence of God at that youth camp. And I don't know. It's like my relationship with the Lord was like took another turn, I guess, to the next level.
Yeah.
And it was never a perfect walk. Like I don't think anyone has that, but even at like 13, 14 years old, I've always hung out with my older brother, and he's like 5 years older than me, and so, I was always that kid hanging out with his older brother, and man, we'd go get into trouble and like just do dumb things.
Yeah.
But stuff that I had no business being there. But I think my older brother was always like, man, I don't want to leave this guy at home. Like he just felt bad. Like,
Yeah.
and I was always begging him like, bro, please, can I go, bro, please? And I would like cry. I'd be like, dude, you're mean if you don't take me. And so he would take me, and man, we really just got into some trouble. And that's why I say like I feel like I saw the Lord's hand move in my life because I'm like,
Yeah.
how am I alive right now? Like, I just look back on funny moments and funny stories, and man, I'm not gonna call anyone out, but just like, I can see the Lord working in my life and in my heart because I would go out and do stupid stuff, but then I would also have moments where like um, even in church, like I would just come back to the Lord.
Yeah.
I would have moments of walking away and wandering, but then I would also be like, man, what am I doing here? Like, I'm not supposed to be here. I was never allowed to be comfortable in my sin, if that made
Oh
sense.
wow.
And there
Because
was
of the conviction
because
that
of the conviction of
yeah,
like,
Spirit of God in you.
yeah, the Spirit of God being like, man, this isn't who you are. Like, this isn't who you are. And always just and it wasn't condemning of like oh you're dumb or like how dare you be here. It was more like, man, this is not who you are. Like, come home.
Yeah.
And so I would have these moments where I would just return to the Lord, and always met with grace, always met with kindness. I even remember so I guess to go through that, I was like 17 years old, um, and I remember just it was like a Sunday morning at like 5, and I was like partially drunk, like,
Mhm.
and I remember my youth leaders at my old church who just really had a big impact on my life. I remember calling him and I was like, "Yo, I'm freaking out right now." I was having like a panic attack, and dude answered his phone, by the way, at
Yeah.
5.
5 a.m.
Shout out Steve, love you, bro.
Awesome.
And
Shout out all youth pastors,
yeah,
man.
youth
You're making a
pastors, you
difference.
do make a difference. I can't tell you. I may not remember what you preached when I was 15, but I definitely remember you being there for
No
me.
doubt.
And so, um, answered his phone, comes and picks me up, and like, you know me, bro, I can ramble. So he listened to me for like an hour and a half,
Yeah.
and I'm like crying. I'm just like, what am I doing? I'm dumb, like, right? And he's just listening to me, hear me pour out my heart, and he just really showed me grace in that moment, and was like, man, stay for church, And so, um, and he didn't make me, and he was like, if you want, I can take you home, but
Yeah.
like, if you want to stay for church, and I just remember that moment being pivotal of like, I guess that I'm like, I have to live in my identity. And I think I was freaking out and having a panic attack. One, because the Lord wanted me to. I think the Lord used that to draw me home.
Yeah.
But also like, um, I was like, I'm not living as I'm supposed to right now. Or I guess I'm not. This isn't who I am. I guess I was having this identity crisis, um, and that was really a big turning point. And then a few years later, I think that kind of started a trajectory of like, it didn't get better right there, but it definitely started me down a trajectory of like, okay, I really have to live this out.
Yeah.
This faith that I have.
Yeah.
Um,
And at this time, you're like serving in your church.
I'm serving at my church, like, and I am, and there was like seasons of like, I would serve at my church, really be faithful for like a year,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I'm a teenager. I'm
Yeah.
talking about this like I'm 35, but like, I'm a teenager. Like, I'm doing like a year and a half, 2 year stints, and then I would have like 6 months or a year where I would walk away, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, but all throughout that time, like the Lord is really, He's given me gifts of like, man, I can, I, I can sing, I would get up there and like do the altar call moments and like,
Yeah.
even like, man, prophetic words and stuff like that, and the Lord is like allowing me to develop that gift in my youth group, and even my youth leaders who trusted me to
Right.
like. I look back on some of the stuff I said in that mic, and I'm like, yo,
Who,
what?
who gave me a
Who
mic?
gave me this mic? But I think they always trusted, man. Like, the Lord is.
Well, I think
doing that.
leaders can always sense when somebody is genuinely being moved by the Lord and genuinely wanting to be used by the Lord.
Yeah.
And that's probably what they saw in you, man.
Yeah.
And so you're 17, you're 18, you're serving, you're kind of back and forth at times
Yeah.
with the Lord. Get into your early 20s.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess I was going towards that path where it's like, right around that 18-year mark, I really again just started dealing with anxiety really
Okay.
bad, and it was like just irrational fears. I think I'm an overthinker, and so I play the what if game really well. Like, when it comes to bad things, right? Like, I'll be like right now, I'm like, what if this light fell on us? Like I could think of 900 different ways of things
Final
to go
Destination
right.
stuff.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have watched that at 9 years old.
Behind your
but-
dad's back.
Behind my dad's back, of course. I'm not kidding, dude. He broke my happy feet game. Like, it was it was another level. But I was always just playing the what if game,
Yeah.
and I was working at AT&T at the time, And I just remember in my lunch break, I had like an hour lunch, and I would just, mind you, I was so anxious I couldn't even drive, dude. I was like it was bad, bro. I'd have a panic attack while I'm driving. I'd have to pull over and like catch my breath, and I'm
Hmm.
like, dude, I live in a like probably from one end of the town to the other, it's like 10 minutes. It's like we don't live in a big town,
Okay.
but it would be like a 2 minute drive, and I'd be like freaking out, you know.
Yeah.
And so I would sit in my car at my lunch break and just Uber Eats because I was like, I'm not driving anywhere.
Yeah.
And I remember listening to a sermon, a Matt Chandler sermon. He's just going over the gospel.
Mhm.
And once again, it's like I had this moment where the gospel just came alive. Um, the love of God became very real, like in that moment of darkness. Because, I mean, it was from sun up to sundown. I was just
Anxious.
anxious, just bad, like panic attacks. I mean, there would be moments where I'd just like freeze. I couldn't move. And even my older brother would be like, dude, are you okay? Like,
Yeah.
like what's going on? Be like, talk to me about it. And I didn't want to talk to anyone about it. Um, and so I'm in my mid panic attack listening to a sermon. And I just remember feeling like the Lord's presence just really invade my car, and just feeling like, man, like God really loves me.
Yeah.
Like, and I think I had a lot of shame, a lot of guilt about, I mean, some of the stuff that I did when I was growing up, and
Hmm.
um, just like, I guess always just this feeling of shame. I really was wrestling with shame and guilt, and just
Yeah.
feeling like
Just from sin that you were wrestling
just
with at
sin
that
that I
time.
was wrestling with at the time,
Yeah.
um, and even just like identifying with it.
Okay.
You know, I would always identify with my sin. I'd really have a solid foundation on my identity in Christ.
Hmm.
Um, and so, I mean, I would have glimpses of it, but it was
Yeah.
never really solid until I understood, like, God actually loves me. Like,
Right.
and not
And
just like,
how old were you when you're having this moment?
it was like, I was like 19.
19.
And, I was like, God really loves me. Like,
Yeah.
and it was just this line I remember where he was like, you know, um, God knew everything that you were gonna do before you were even born, and yet He still chose to pay the price for you.
Right.
Like God doesn't regret saving you. I remember that line,
Yeah.
and I was just like, yo, like I always used to be like, I think God regrets saving me. Like
Yeah.
I think God regrets allowing me to go up to the altar at 8 years old, or having an encounter with His presence at 13, or like I was like, dude, I was like, I used to walk in these gifts that the Lord has given me. I used to like serve at my church, and what am I doing? Like
Hmm.
I'm a fraud. I just felt like a fraud. And I think I finally understood, like I'm just the Lord's working out my salvation. Like
Yeah.
the Lord is walking me in this process of being sanctified, looking more like Jesus. Um where I was like, I need to start with that foundation of God's not mad at me.
Right.
God loves me.
Yeah.
Um and so that moment really started me down that path. And then also right around that time, I just remember being like, you know what, I started looking for a church because I had stopped attending my church at that time,
Okay.
and so I was like, man, I need to look for a church, because I just remember, just I just remember just this season of like, man, I feel like I really need to um, find a place where like I can grow, and not that I wasn't growing there or anything, but I think there was just more often than not. Um, I think there needed to be growth on my part.
Yeah.
I
Well,
look
and you
back
grew up
now.
in that church, and sometimes being so familiar with this space, um, we allow it, not necessarily that it does, but we allow it to keep us stuck.
For sure.
And so,
Yeah, because you run into. I think for me, I would just run into like I had excuses for everything that was happening. I guess if that
yeah,
makes sense. Like if they would want
I
to,
remember that, Ace.
if they needed to, yeah, if they needed to correct me in a certain
Yeah.
area, I was always very quick to defend myself. I
Okay.
guess, and so I think I got good at that because I grew up there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you're
And
looking for a church.
I'm looking for a church, and I
This is post-pandemic?
this is
Yeah, it's
yeah
post-pandemic.
post pandemic because it was like late 2020. It wasn't right at the start.
Okay.
But late 2020, I'm looking for a church, and I found a few churches in town which are great. And it was never like, oh, I didn't like that church. It was more like I just didn't feel like I was home.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just weird sense of like, I didn't feel like I found community. And
Okay.
even though I was involved in some community groups or like small groups, um, I felt like I hadn't found my people.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think it was like June of 21,
Okay.
or maybe later
Real
in the
church
fall.
started March of 21, so
It might have been later in the fall.
okay.
I remember going to the school where you guys were at the school,
Yeah.
and because I actually, so I was, I've always been like, okay, let me hear how this dude preaches. So I remember going to your Spotify before I went and visited, because the way I found you guys was, you guys had someone taking pictures, Isaac,
Yeah.
and I saw on his Instagram story, I was like, oh, there's this new church starting, cool. I was like, maybe I'll go at the opening. I didn't go,
Yeah.
and then um,
Finally made your way into
finally
the
made
gym
my
though.
way into the gym, and because I had listened to a sermon that you preached on Spotify. I was out doing. I was like, I was working out, and I was listening to the sermon. And I was like, yo, this dude can preach, and it's not heresy. Let's go. And
I don't know. I'd be interested to go see it now.
I,
Those were my early days.
I remembered your illustration.
No, well, that's
We don't
another.
gotta talk about it, but it was. I just remember the illustration and how you tied it in, and I was like, yo, that's fire. This dude can preach.
I appreciate it.
And I made my way into the gym. From the moment I walked in, I just felt welcomed. I felt like the worship. I enjoyed the worship, and even just the sense of like, I felt like, man, these people really care about each other and
Yeah.
me. And I'm
Yeah.
like, and I just walked in here.
Yeah.
I just walked in here, and they're actually like, I feel like they actually care about me. They weren't like, you guys weren't faking it.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because I think
It
sometimes
was real.
it was real, right? I was like, they gotta be right. This is real church. And then after you preached and we closed, yeah, y'all closed the service. You used to stand to the side with your wife,
Yeah.
and y'all would meet people.
Yeah.
And I went and met you guys, and it was very brief. I got a cool little plastic Real Church mug. I broke the lid to that thing, so I'm sad. I was gonna keep it
Because
like on
those
the
things
shelf.
are cheap, man.
Dude, I know. We need to order more just so I can have as a
Yeah.
replica. But I remember meeting with you, and then I added you on Facebook, and I was like, yeah, no shot this dude remembers me. And you messaged me on Messenger. You're like, hey, bro, it was nice to meet you. Let's go get lunch. And I was like, cool, let's do it. And then I ghosted you.
Yeah, you did.
And then I ghosted you.
Ghosted me.
I don't know if did we set a time?
I don't know.
I
I
don't
just
think we
remember you
did.
stopped responding.
Yeah. I was like, nah, nah, no, I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
But I think I just used to be like, I used to be afraid of like, man, what is this guy gonna think of me?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I ghosted you. I started visiting other churches, and but then I just was like, you know what? Nah, I need to give it another shot. So this is about maybe not even a year, maybe like a few months. I don't know,
Yeah.
4 or 5 months. It was I remember it was May of 22, I think,
Okay.
because it was the last Sunday y'all had in the school.
Okay. So
And
baptism Sunday.
Baptism Sunday.
I remember.
And I went, and I actually went with a friend because, and I don't know how I skipped this detail. I think I was so discouraged because I didn't find a place
Yeah.
that I was actually in the mentality of like, I don't know if I'm going to try this again, just church in general. I was like, I think I'm just going to be at home with my Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I was not going to go back. I was basically like, man, kind of on my way out of like, even just the faith. I felt like it was so heavy. It was so hard to be a Christian. I was like, I can't do this. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, I can't even find a place to meet. What's wrong with all these people, right?
Mhm.
Like, I had this mentality
Yeah.
of like, it was stuff wrong with my situation instead
Yeah.
of, I guess, my heart.
Okay.
And so
You revisit with a friend.
I revisit with a friend, and man, she just been encouraging me like through all these doubts and this times of faith that I was having. And she's like, hey, I'm gonna be in town. Let's go visit that church. And I was like, cool. And she's like, I was like, cool. And then Saturday night, I was like, hey, I'm not gonna be able to go. Like,
Yeah.
and she was like, are you really not gonna be able to go, or are you just like making an excuse? And I was like, yeah, you're right. Okay. I was like, well, I'll meet you there. And so it's the last Sunday. I don't even remember the sermon, but I just remember feeling like, okay, like I need to stay here. Like
Yeah.
I need to. These people have been so nice to me every time. So I need to stay here. I need to commit. And at that time, I was just like, Lord, my prayer was like, Lord, I just want a place where I can really let my roots grow.
Mhm.
And just commit, I guess, and just make a decision to stay. And differences aside, because there's no perfect church. I was like, Lord, I know there's not a perfect church. I'm not perfect, but I just want a place to find my roots. And so, we actually did end up setting a time for lunch after that. Because
Yeah.
I think I messaged you again.
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A. You're like, cool, you want Chick-fil-A? I was like, yeah. And I walk in, and I even just like the small detail of you were like, what you want, bro? I got you. Like, you paid for my lunch. At the time, I was like, dude, I don't know if I can afford Chick-fil-A today, but you know what? I have a 4-count kids meal. And you just paid for my lunch, and we sat down and just started to talk. You're really good at like getting people to talk about themselves,
Yeah.
but I think I'm really good at talking about myself no matter what. So
Everybody is.
I remember you just listening to me, and I was like, for some reason, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna tell this dude everything about myself.
Yeah.
And
You unloaded that day.
I was like, let's see if this dude runs.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if he runs after this, then I know it's chalked and Jesus isn't real kind of thing.
Yeah.
I really was like at this crossroads in my life, in my faith, where I was like, I just need to get this out to somebody.
Yeah, I remember.
And I just remember you meeting me with grace, and like, I don't know, I'm getting emotional, but you were just like, you didn't look at me different. You weren't treating me like I was this outcast or like, I don't know. I always felt like a leper, I guess. I always felt like I was too dirty or whatever. And you didn't meet me that way. You were like, I really was able to feel the love of God through you. And I don't know, I'm about to cry. But I just remember being like, and just even hearing from the Lord, like, man, it was an answer to my prayer of like, I can be real, and I think even that attracted me. The heart of real church is like, man, we exist to point real people to a real Jesus with a real love, and real people means like, yo, real struggles. Like there's these real issues that we face as humans, and the sin that we entangle ourselves with, and I just remember myself feeling like I had to fake it, but for the first time I was able to be real, and I think like, you know, I was able to be 100% real, and you didn't push me away, and I know that was, man, I know that was God working through you, but
Well, I think too, I empathize with you.
Yeah.
Like, the heart of our church, like you said, real people, is that we all fall short of the glory of God, and I think for so long the church, and maybe it's not even the church, man.
Right.
Maybe it's we put this on the church.
Yeah.
That those people think. Those people, and it's like, man, actually, if you get to know some of these people, they're real, they're raw, and we're just trying to walk with Jesus and be a light in our community and our families. And so I remember that moment. I've always appreciated vulnerability, authenticity, real. That's why we called the church Real Church. And so when you did that, I was like, man. And I just empathized with you because I remember that's what my pastor has always done for me. My pastor, Terry Stiegel in Dalhart, shout out Pastor Terry and Ms. Danny. Man, the guy has just known everything about me. And he always met me with grace with what you said. And he exemplified Jesus to me. And this is what Jesus does to us when we bring him our sin. He doesn't run. If anything, he gets down in the dirt with us. And ultimately, we know he actually took that sin on and covered us and paid for the price for that. And so, we're sitting in Chick-fil-A, and I just remember you pouring your heart out, bro. And in that moment, I knew, I was like, man, I just need to I need to lean in. I need to lean in and let him know, hey, me too. Me too. And I remember what we were talking about, and you know, I was in your shoes at that, you know, at one point in my life, and I remember just saying like, hey, but I believe that you can be free from that. And so, I remember that moment, man. That was such a that was a moment I feel like started. We're not in these two chairs without that moment. And the beautiful thing is, it didn't even happen in a church. Like God used the church. But it was a moment of vulnerability over the Lord's chicken.
I was about to say I can make an argument that Chick-fil-A might be a church. the way
Chick-fil-A
that-
might be a church.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I remember that moment. And that moment, I felt like God used as a launching pad
Mm,
uh, in our friendship, in our relationship when it comes to discipleship.
right.
Because I remember after that, we shortly, because you said you came on the last Sunday,
Right.
and then we were kind of homeless there because we were
Yeah.
preparing the campus that we're at now.
Mm,
But I remember at one point we started laying carpet, and you were like,
yeah.
"Hey, man, like I can come and help." And
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew what you were getting yourself into.
Right.
And so, man, we came, and I think it was in the black room when
Yeah.
you came, and we were laying the carpet, and you're just passing me carpet squares,
Right.
and I'm on my knees just going at it.
Right.
And again, we had just another. I think that was the moment I was vulnerable with you,
Yeah.
and again to let you know, like, hey, like I'm a normal dude.
Right.
I know I'm a pastor, but that doesn't negate that. Hey, I wrestle with stuff too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I think that conversation I remember too because I mean, I was still just wrestling through this. I'm not good enough to be here. I'm not good enough to serve at this church. Like, I was trying to convince you to like run me away.
yeah, you
Yeah.
were. I remember.
And I even had this moment because I think also another way we connected was because you were like, well, what do you do? Like, and I told you I could play instruments. I think I sent you like a voice memo song cover I did. And you were like, cool, I'll connect you with my worship leader. And I ended up meeting him. And I even like, I think before the walls were up in here, like I led worship one time just with my
Yeah.
acoustic.
I remember that we were in a big circle.
Yeah.
The auditorium. There was only a wall.
Yeah. There was only, just
Yeah.
that in the front door. And
Yeah. And we met up here as a church to pray.
yeah.
And I had asked you to lead us in a
Yeah. And you were
song.
Pastor Carlos Way, just, you ready? Cool. You're not? Sweet. Just don't mess it up. And
Literally, I tell people, don't screw it up.
yeah.
And you didn't. It
I
was
didn't.
beautiful. It was a beautiful moment.
I'm telling you, dude, God must love me because he didn't let me mess that up.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. It was just, I would like serve, and I think I had this mentality of like, you can't serve anywhere at all until you're perfect. And I had this moment even after that. You got real with me and vulnerable, and I was like, okay, I know that I don't have to be perfect. And then, even then after that, it was you and the associate pastor at the time, and y'all were both just. I was trying to convince you guys like, I'm not fit to be here. I even tried to quit on you. I was like, dude, I'm just gonna sit at church like.
Yeah.
And I think I just remember you being like, you telling me that like, dude, you don't. When is it? I think you got a little more stern with me at the time, but
I
with
did.
love.
I remember that conversation in the sound booth.
Yeah, and you were like, I guess when are you gonna be good enough then?
Yeah.
Like, is it after this? Is it after that? Is it when you achieve this? Is it when you achieve that? And even just to reminding me of like, you're not your sin anyway.
Yeah.
Like your identity in Christ, you are a child of God first and foremost. You may struggle with this, but like, that's not who you are in a
Right.
sense.
And I think that's important.
Yeah.
Let's pause right there
Yeah.
because, man, how many people right now are sitting in church not serving
Yeah.
because they don't feel good enough?
Right.
They don't feel good enough.
Yeah.
Maybe they've been told they weren't good enough.
Mm.
Maybe that's what they've always believed. And if it weren't for that moment, man, look now, like kind of what you said. Now you serve on the worship team, on the preaching team. You preach in our youth. You serve in our. You lead worship for our. Like your hand is in so much in God's kingdom, all because you finally let go of the belief that I have to be perfect.
Yeah.
And to hit the other side of the coin, it's like it's not that we were okay with
Right.
just people living in sin.
Right.
It wasn't that.
And that was never communicated even like, it was not like it's not like you were like, yeah, whatever, bro, like just sin however you want. It was like this reminder of like, hey, I don't think you're gonna be able to. And even just back to the basics of like, there's I think it's John Piper. He's like, the only sin you can defeat is the one you know is forgiven.
Wow.
And I think it was just a reminder of like, yo, you have to know that you're forgiven.
Yeah.
You know, you have to know that one, that's not who you are. Two, you're forgiven, and then like three, you can move forward because of those first two things.
Yeah.
But there is no moving forward. If you just continue to beat yourself up and like
Yeah.
identify with it, because
And at the most simplest form, how I like to, it's like, I have 3 children. I know you don't have any kids
mm,
yet, but how silly would it sound for me to tell my son,
mm,
like, hey, when you stop doing this, then you can be my son.
mm,
Then you can carry the name Rodriguez. And it's
right,
like, man, that's silly, right?
right,
But that's exactly what people in church are doing.
yeah,
It's like, until I get this out of my life,
right,
until and it's actually the person of Jesus that's going to
mm,
get that out of your life.
yeah,
It's not going to be your hard work.
mm-mm,
It's not going to be you white knuckling it all
right,
until you
yeah,
could resist finally.
right,
It's when you truly have this moment where you encounter the person of Jesus
mm,
and you say, "My life is yours.
yeah,
It's yours." And then in that moment that you're saved, they're still going to be wrestling,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
But we hold on to the promise that the great author who he started it,
yeah,
he's going to finish it.
yeah,
And there's grace.
yeah,
We serve a patient God.
right,
And it's like, I think you finally learned that side of God. I felt like you didn't come to, maybe it wasn't a lack of intelligence by no means, but it's like you never saw that side of his character,
yeah,
of his patience.
right,
Like, we serve a patient God.
yeah,
And he's not mad at you, Ace. He's not
right,
angry with you.
yeah,
He actually loves you a lot.
mm,
And it's been beautiful to watch over these last, 3 or so years, of you not only serving but leading God's people.
mm,
So you went from a place where it was, man, I can't even go to church.
yeah,
I'm so jacked up. I'm so
yeah,
messed up, to now, like, you could even openly and like, man, I'm jacked up,
yeah,
but God is using me.
yeah, and it's like cause I guess I'm like, the fight now is like, man, that's not my identity,
Yeah.
you know, um, and I think it's like this understanding of the gospel where it's like, people that I guess don't understand the gospel or struggle to understand grace, aren't able to be honest about where they're at,
Yeah.
like, and I think Tim Keller says it best, like, and I quote a lot of people, guys.
Yeah.
So,
We'll get into that here in a minute.
but he says like, you know, I think it's people that are really changed by the gospel that can be honest about how sinful they are, in the current moment, because it's not like we deny that, we're struggling with sin, right? Like we all do in some
Yeah.
capacity, even if it's not like this big sin, I guess, that the culture sees. Like, some of us get angry really quickly.
Yeah.
Some of us can't control our tongue. Some of us, there's just these even like hard intentions, like these things where it's like, man, I am doing this for personal gain or greed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think when you truly understand the gospel, it's like you said, like I can have joy and serve because I know that I'm a child of God and the Lord is walking me through this,
Yeah.
and I'm not stuck here. Like it won't be forever. And there's this hope of like one day there won't my struggle won't be this. It'll be something else. And regardless of what that is, like I think our ultimate goal and hope is like, man, one day we will be free from the presence of sin.
Yeah. We'll
for
be
good,
perfected.
for good. Like, there won't be a struggle with sin.
Yeah.
It'll be, us in the presence of God. And so, I think I've been able to find joy and even lead, and because of that hope of the gospel. And
That's
even
incredible.
even on a practical level, it's been like, yo, I still confess my sin to you and
Yeah.
to like to guys in my life, not so that you guys can forgive me, but I think so I'm reminded of the gospel again, because I
Yeah.
think sometimes that's where we go wrong, and even for people that are like, man, I can't serve because of this.
Yeah.
It's like when we confess that there's a scripture in James that says, man, confess your sins to one another
Yeah.
and pray for one another that you may be healed. I think what really happens there is that community. Because I used to try and experience God's love on my own, by myself,
Mhm.
isolated from people.
Mhm.
But I think when you allow people in, you can experience God's love tangibly through other people when
That's
they don't
good,
push
man.
you away. Because that's what I experienced with you. That's what I experienced with Pastor Braden. It's like you guys you look at me and you're like, and I hear it all the time. I even had this moment with Pastor Braden where I was on a phone call and I was like, once again, just trying to quit on him. And he was
Yeah.
like, dude, he's like, when I think about you, bro, he's like, when I think about you, Ace, you're not, I don't think about you as the guy that struggles with this sin. He's like, I don't think about you as like this, that, or the other. He's like, you're more than what you struggle with.
Yeah.
He's like, you are, a child of God. And just to like, he was just reminding me of the gospel and of my identity in Christ. And I think that more than beating myself up and thinking that I'm not good enough has helped me grow.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
um, it's helped me grow, and it's like it's not like I've become this perfect guy now. And I think that's where back to circle back around to the what you said at the beginning. Like sometimes people think whether you're on the preaching team, whether you're on
Worship leader.
worship leader, whether you're even man, they might even think like, yo, if you serve in any capacity at church, you must be perfect.
Right.
And I think more often than not, we're just, it's like, man, we're all, we're all like these people that are struggling with sin, but we're all walking with the same purpose of like trying to glorify Jesus and
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
just loving God and like loving neighbor,
Yeah.
because that's what matters.
Yeah.
And so,
And I think, and again, man, it's just been so cool to see you grow,
mm,
um, as a young man, as a disciple.
yeah,
Um, man, it's just been a cool journey.
yeah,
I want to get into a little bit about, you guys hear him quoting what we would say theologians of our generation, like John Piper, like Tim Keller.
yeah,
You like to read.
yeah,
Tell us where, and because you like to read, you find theology
mm,
very intriguing.
yeah,
Anytime I have, you help me wrestle through theological
mm,
concepts and ideas that maybe I'm preaching.
mm.
And man, where'd that come from?
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like I've always kind of been. I don't know, if I have an interest in something, I get really nerdy. And then growing up in the age of the internet, I think
Yeah,
as it has its downfalls, its pitfalls, I guess, but it also has its benefits. And so, I think I've always kind of had a good memory, and I know that that's like from the Lord, like He gifted me that.
yeah,
I am everyone's passwords vault, bro. Like my sister's like, "Yo, what's this? What's this account? What's my email password?" And I'm like, "I don't know," or I'm like, "You know what? I don't know why I know it, but this is what it is."
yeah,
Like, um, or they'll be like, I don't know. I've just always had a good memory. My brother's like, "What's that one movie that we watched where that dude said that?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's this."
yeah.
And so
That transferred over to the Bible.
that transferred over to the Bible, and I think at a young age, I think I just fell in love with wanting to know why things are the way they are,
Yeah,
or like why is this belief something that we hold as a Christian, and then going down this path of like, okay, I don't know everything. I'm reading my Bible, but sometimes I read it and I'm like, what is this saying? And so I would just really just start to do research on YouTube, Google, and I was kind of self-taught a lot in like, um, I guess trying to learn who the healthy theologians are
yeah,
versus the non-healthy ones, because I feel like I've had this evolution. Maybe that's too much of a secular word. I've had this growth of like, I went from like being super hyper charismatic, Pentecostal demon slayer theology to like, um, almost cessationist, Calvinistic, Reformed. Like I've had this this I guess metamorphosis of trying to understand theologies, and
yeah,
um, I think it was the grace of God,
yeah,
for sure, because I'm like, yo, how am I not a Christian crazy?
yeah,
How am I not on this weird um and I think I've always tried to find the balance and the tension
mhm,
in some theologies, and so um and I just like to read, or even listen to audiobooks, or I'll listen to I was a sermon junkie for a long time, just
same.
tons of sermons, like probably like 500 Matt Chandler sermons, like 1,000 Tim Keller,
Yeah,
just like a ton of sermons,
yeah,
and then hearing so like what I'll do is I'll hear a guy that I respect, mention somebody, then I go look up that guy, like I know about, I kind of have like like ancient friends, ancient friends of the faith, where like there's a guy that I really like to like listen to his sermons still. His name's Martin Lloyd Jones,
Yeah.
and I heard about him through Tim Keller, and then I started reading his books, and then he has references, and so I'll just kind of like trace them down to, because I also want to know like how are these guys the way they are?
Yeah.
Why are they the way they are? Who spiritually formed them?
Yeah.
And then that's kind of like the process and the path that I go down. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of it is just like, man, the Lord has gifted me with that sort of good memory.
Yeah.
And then also like, because sometimes I'll read something and I'm like, yo, I love that. And then I would like try and share it with my brother. And he's like, I'm bored, and not that he's like not interested, but it's
Yeah.
just like, I think sometimes I can find what other people seem to be boring, like,
Yeah.
interesting and intriguing. I mean, even you, bro, sometimes you'll be like, dude, snooze fest, you know what I mean? And, we
I'm
joke
like,
around
bro, we
that
got to
way.
get you a girlfriend.
Right. Like, dude, why are you reading?
But also, I think that's one reason we clicked.
Right.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you saw another young guy who wasn't like suited up and tied up,
Right.
who loved theology,
Yeah.
who respected theology,
Yeah.
but also preached it in a way that maybe wasn't your typical old school church.
Yeah.
Because you said, I remember you saying, hey, this guy is pretty solid. And so you had an ear for, or is this guy preaching Bible, or is
Yeah.
he preaching feelings? Is he
Yeah.
preaching ideas and,
Yeah.
opinions?
Right.
And I think that's what that was one area we connected in.
Yeah. I think right away you were like, you just kind of hearing my language when we first met. I used to be a lot more. I've been not. I guess I've been.
We've been undoing.
You've been undoing my churchy language.
Yeah,
and
there we go.
Because I think one, it helps me connect better with people.
Yeah.
Because when I start talking about like
Cessation.
soteriology and
Cessationism.
cessationism, I said that so casually, dude, and people were like, "What does that mean?"
There's
But
people on the YouTube channel right now. What is
what is that?
cessationism?
Or like, actually, cessationism is the biblical way. So why would you walk out of it? But
we still both worship
right, yeah,
together.
we just believe what the Bible says. No, I'm just kidding.
Another podcast for another
podcast.
day.
No, but I
But
think
that connected us.
that connected us for sure. Because you were like, I probably was talking in Old English when I met you, King James English for sure. And you were like, you read the Bible, don't you?
Yeah.
But
Which again, I appreciated, because even being at that time, I wasn't a lead pastor, but I'd been a children's pastor, youth pastor, pastored at so many levels.
yeah,
And man, let's be honest, like, we could be better as a church of getting in our words. And so when I actually saw somebody who like knew the word, I was like, okay, there's something about this guy that intrigued me.
yeah,
You reminded me, and I shared with you, I remember early on in my Bible college days where we weren't allowed to watch TV.
yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to watch sermons then, because I always knew I wanted to be a preacher.
Mm.
And I became a sermon junkie just like you. And so I fell in love with theology. And same thing, I started listening to guys, and I kind of self-taught, like, that doesn't sit well with my spirit.
Yeah.
I don't think, that's what the word says. And then at that time was during the young, restless, reformed era. And so I'm listening to guys like Mark Driscoll, John Piper, Matt Chandler, and getting and pulling from those guys. And that was one journey, one part of my life. But yeah, I look at it and I heard it in you as a young man, and I was like, I can appreciate this guy.
Yeah.
I like it. He loves the word.
Yeah.
He's got a conviction for his word. Because that's another thing we say about our church is like, hey, just because we're a non-denominational church doesn't mean like we're not Bible people.
Yeah.
We love the Bible.
Yeah.
We want to live in the Bible. We want to know it. We want to soak it up, study it, read it.
Yeah.
And so I appreciated that about you when I started picking up on your language.
Right. And I think a lot of it too, what I've been growing in, I think lately is, I think sometimes you can know a lot about the Bible, or like even just know the Bible, right? Or think that you know it. I think for me, even sometimes I had an affinity for like apologetics and like wanting to learn how to defend the faith. And so, some of that like teenager arrogance, I guess, was like I just want to know more than the other guy
Yeah.
too.
Were you a keyboard warrior?
Uh,
Would you
dude,
pick fights on the internet?
bro, yeah.
I would. I'd post things just
No,
to.
I
When I was younger,
I had to
I
go
don't do that
back and
anymore.
delete Facebook posts. If you know,
If
I
you're
love
a
you.
victim of that,
If I ever said something to you on Facebook, I love you, bro. I mean, my fault.
yeah,
But I think I just was trying to win arguments, and so I would read a lot for that too, for that reason too. It wasn't
yeah.
always like this holy like
I want to love the
I
Lord
just want to love God,
with all my
right?
mind.
With all, yeah, no, it was like yeah, let me see how I can make you sound dumb,
Yeah.
okay? But I think the Lord used that for good. And even I'm continuing to learn how to like grow in wisdom, because I think sometimes knowledge and wisdom are different. I think
Absolutely.
knowledge is like I know it all, and wisdom is like, man, I'm actually living and walking this
Yeah.
out.
And well, and you're a Bible guy,
Yeah.
so we're both Bible guys. You know, Romans tells us what
Mm.
knowledge does.
Yeah.
Only knowledge.
Right.
It puffs us up.
For sure.
And when you move into wisdom,
Mm.
you begin to love
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
right? And so I think God's he's very clear when he wraps up the entire law into two.
Yeah.
He says, "Hey, love me,
Yeah.
but also love people."
Right.
And when you're constantly feeding yourself with just full knowledge,
Mm.
just to be knowledgeable,
Right.
and that's your intent,
Right.
man, you're just gonna want to prove that you're smarter than people. You're
Right.
just gonna want to make people look dumb on the
Right.
internet. And yeah, I remember just slowly, because I was that guy. I
Yeah.
empathized with you once again. I was like,
Yeah.
man, I used to be this guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, how is that helping you love people?
Well, I think we even had a conversation about a year ago, maybe, or I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago. Time's been flying by, but we went and had a steak, and I remember just I was feeling convicted at the time to be like, yo, what is all my knowledge doing for me? Like, I can know a lot, but like, I'm a jerk. You
Mhm.
know, I just kind of had that conviction of like, man, I'm a jerk. I can be a jerk. Like, and this isn't. It's
Mhm.
not like cute or funny. Like, man, our faith is one about loving people.
Right.
And so I was, I was like, just I remember talking to you about it and being like, I want to start to use the gift that God gave me to love people well, instead of just trying to win arguments or
Yeah.
just know more than someone else. And I think I've had to grow in that humility and really just be like, one, I don't know everything. So like, I think sometimes I can still come across of like I feel like I know it all.
Yeah.
But I admit, like, man, I don't know everything.
Mhm.
And I'm just trying to work out my faith with fear and trembling, you know,
Yeah.
like the Apostle Paul says. But also, like, am I loving people well? Like, and if I'm not, like, man, Lord help me, like, you know,
Yeah.
cause, and I remember just having that conversation with you, and you were like, dude, like, you were kind of just like, yeah, man, I'm glad you're there now, or I'm glad you're
Yeah.
like the Lord is doing that in you, because, and you told me at the time, like, that used to be me, like,
Yeah.
you know, knowledge can puff you up, and I remember being puffed up and being like, yeah, you're wrong. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know how to tell you, or just being like, man, we can disagree, but I'm right,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
thing.
It was a moment where it just transfers from your head to your heart.
Yeah.
And because on the flip side too, we don't belittle
No.
theology.
Right.
We don't minimize it. We don't.
Mm.
I mean, we love it.
Yeah.
We want to learn. We want
Mhm.
to. The word says to continually to grow in your knowledge and wisdom of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And so, another one is, hey, love the Lord with all your mind.
Yeah.
And so we definitely don't belittle it. We're not
Right.
against it.
Mm-mm.
We just want to make sure that it's the primary motivator is to love God and to love people,
Right.
and not to hurt people and make them
Yeah.
feel dumb.
Yeah. Or even to like just be right and then be wrong.
And ultimately, yeah, pride.
Yeah.
Pride.
Yeah.
I just want to be right,
Mm.
and I want you to know that I'm right,
Mhm.
and I'm going to convince you that I'm
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And so yeah, well, man, yeah, and so your love for the word, your love for just growing academically, you're a reader, and I
Yeah.
think that's why you're a great leader. I think
Mm.
leaders are readers,
Mm.
and you continue to grow in that area, which is admirable, even as your pastor, man.
Mm.
Like you sometimes you come in here and you ask me what I think about a certain thing, and it just challenges me, and always reminds me like, hey, like keep growing, like
Mm.
don't settle,
Mm.
um, like challenge your mind,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that
Mm.
from our friendship and from our relationship, and
Yeah.
uh, I think it's super healthy to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
No, and I think I've always I appreciate too. One thing I appreciate about you is you've always, I guess, that invitation to like not just be, because I feel like we have three different relationships. Like at one point because you're my boss, because
yeah,
I'm part
because you
time,
were, yeah,
and then you're my pastor, but you're also my friend. And um, I think sometimes more often than not, I needed that friend and pastor.
hmm
Um, and I don't know how you manage that. I don't know how you balance that well, dude. I'm
the
always
grace
like,
of God.
yeah, it's like,
It's the grace of God because I haven't always been great at, and I'm
yeah,
still don't. I have still so much to learn. It's crazy to think that we just celebrated 4 years this
yeah,
Sunday,
that's
and
crazy.
you've been a part of it for three of them,
Yeah,
and so you've seen just as every bit of not just growth in your own life, but me as a pastor, as a
mm,
boss, as a friend,
mm,
and so um, yeah, man, I wanted people to see what I see.
yeah,
They see platform ace.
mm,
They see lead worship ace, and
mm,
even on occasion preaching ace,
yeah,
which you do such an amazing job. You're that guy that's just freaking good at everything, and but man, I'm honored that I get to see the behind the scenes.
mm,
I'm not gonna say real because you're real on the platform.
yeah,
You're real on the platform. You are who you are, and that's evident. But man, even to see the joking ace, the
yeah,
laughing ace, the
yeah,
um, where we pick at each other,
yeah,
and Pastor Braden does as well, and so
mm,
and that's all for a reason, and that's your testimony,
yeah,
and to hear how you grew up, and man, I know so many that who will be watching this
mm,
who wrestled with crippling
yeah,
anxiety. Like I guarantee it, nobody in our church could have ever guessed that you wrestled with an anxiety that would
mm,
cripple you,
mm,
and to see you, no way, you're leading worship in front
yeah,
of hundreds,
yeah,
and ha- you're telling me you wrestled with anxiety.
mm,
So I think that'll be encouraging to those, and then to those, I think you encouraged of, oh, so that guy wrestles with sin.
yeah,
Like, yeah,
yeah,
we do,
mm,
and we're just like you.
yeah,
We're just walking with Jesus one day at a time,
mm,
and you wrestle with sin, and you're on a platform. Like,
mm,
um, I think that's encouraging to those like who have convinced themselves like I can't serve. Like
yeah,
I gotta get perfect first,
yeah,
which is never gonna happen.
no, because there's even, man, there's areas I can guarantee you right now where I feel like I have a main focus on one sin,
Mm-hmm.
but there's like probably 30 other things that I do that I
Right.
haven't even seen yet,
Yeah.
and so
But again, our eyes are not on
our sin,
our sin. Our
yeah,
eyes are on Jesus,
for
who will
sure,
then, you know, by His grace and mercy, free us from it.
mm,
And so I think that'll be super encouraging to people like that.
yeah,
And man, I just appreciate you sharing your journey, and just to
mm,
see where you're at, man. I just got to say, as your pastor, like I'm
yeah,
so proud of you, dude.
mm,
From the young man that you walked into real church,
mm,
kind of. Obviously, you have your family, so
yeah,
I mean this in a church way, but like an orphan of the
yeah,
church
yeah,
who you grew up in, but you still didn't feel at home,
yeah,
and to see that the Lord has planted you here,
mm-hmm,
used you here,
mm,
and to impact so many lives around. As a matter of fact, you probably have no idea how many people you've blessed.
mm,
And so, hey, in the chat or in the comments below, just man, encourage Ace.
yeah,
Uh, of maybe a conversation you had with him. Maybe it was something he said during communion. Maybe it was something he said during a worship set.
mm,
Maybe even a sermon he preached. Like I said, he does it all around here. Man, just let him know how he's blessed you, and maybe how this encouraged you, because this is why it's important that we get our stories out there,
yeah,
because there are people in Midland who don't love Jesus
right,
because maybe they wrestle with sin, maybe they're enslaved to it,
mm,
and we our mission is until Midland loves Jesus, and
Yeah.
so man, thank you.
Mm.
I think we only scratched the surface.
Yeah. Oh,
I
for
think
sure.
there's so much to you
Mm.
that we didn't even get into. Just
No.
like uh, I think we covered hobbies because one of your hobbies is reading.
Right.
Like you read and listen to sermons for fun,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
we'll get as a co-host. You're gonna see him on here pretty often, and maybe
Right.
we'll touch into more of your life. But man, honestly, right now, what I want to do is I want to push the mic away, and I just want if you could tell the people of Midland one thing, uh, man. Obviously, the name of this podcast is Until Midland Loves Jesus.
Yeah.
If you could tell the person who loves Jesus, if you could tell the person who goes to church but maybe hasn't surrendered to Christ,
Mm.
if you could talk to the person who doesn't know Jesus and they're going to listen to this, maybe you're talking to the person who wrestles with anxiety
Mm.
or who wrestles with um, maybe feeling a certain way about themselves.
Yeah.
If you could close us off with something, what would you tell those people?
Yeah. My mind immediately goes to, um, there's a Charles Spurgeon once. He actually like wrestled with depression a lot,
And
and
he's also known as the
he,
Prince of
the Prince
Preachers.
of Preachers himself. He lived like in the 1800s. I mean, maybe early 1900s, but um, he once time he said, "Man, we have to kiss the waves that pushes against the rock." And that's him, Jesus, right?
Wow.
And so I think sometimes whether you feel like a fraud, whether you feel anxiety, depression, man, I don't know what your struggle might be, but I think sometimes we can, instead of seeing those as like a, I guess, terrible thing that you're in at the moment, maybe that's something that one, the Lord can use to push you towards Himself, but two, like, man, that also doesn't have to define you. That's an external force pushing you towards Jesus, because I think God can use all things to work together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose, like the Apostle Paul says. And so, man, I don't know what that situation might be, but I think one, you have to know that God loves you, that He's not mad at you. Man, I don't know. Maybe you feel like a fraud. I think more often than not, you're just a human that's struggling and wrestling. And especially if you call yourself a child of God, like that is who you are first and foremost. Like you're His kid. And even if you've walked away, maybe you ran away from the church because you felt like it was too hard. Um, Man, you can return. Like, and the one thing that God's gonna do, He's gonna run after you. Like, I'm thinking of the prodigal son, the story where the father runs to embrace his child. I mean, and Jesus tells like three different parables. The one of the lost coin.
Yeah.
Like, there's that woman who she there was a lost coin, and when she found it, she was happy. Or the prodigal son, he returns home. His father is happy that his son returned home, and so, um, man, God, you are valuable to God. You matter so much to Him that He sent His only Son to die on the cross to pay the price for your sins, because ultimately He wants that relationship with you. And so, and you can come to Him as you are. You don't have to fix yourself up. You don't have to clean yourself up. The whole point of the gospel is, man, I'm, you have to know that you're a sinner, right? Like, we don't shy away from that. We know that we sin, that we struggle with sin. Sometimes we even enjoy that sin. Um, but God Himself, God alone, can change and save us. And so that's what I leave you with is the gospel, is that, you know, Jesus lived the perfect life that none of us ever can. And then He died that death to pay the price for your sins. And He rose again 3 days later, forever saying that you can be His child if you come to Him in faith. And because the grave is empty, our hope is alive now more than ever before. Um, and even now, man, Jesus is calling you home. Um, and if you feel like you can't belong anywhere, you can belong here at Real Church. Like, that's the point of um our church, is to point real people to a real Jesus with a real love. And I feel like that really impacted me, and that's why I got this. I got
Yeah.
it tatted on my skin. I got it on me not as like a church branding thing, but like for the rest of my life, I'll remember um meeting the people here, meeting the pastor, meeting the, yeah, and it wasn't even just you. It was like everyone at the church was like kind to me, loved me, and so, man, you can come here as you are, and we're just gonna point you to Jesus, because that's all we're doing here every week is we point people to Jesus, and we want to love them well. And so, yeah,
Man, incredible, incredible. I'm proud of you, dude. I'm
thanks,
proud of
bro.
you. I love you.
Love you,
I'm
man.
thankful for you. I'm excited for this podcast journey, even with what we're gonna see.
Yeah.
I'm praying that God really utilizes it to
Mm,
speak, even if it's just one person,
yeah.
even if it's just one person. So, man, shout out to everybody who tuned into the first episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope if you even come to Real Church, you kind of got a glimpse into the man behind the mic
Yeah.
in Ace. And man, come up to him at church, around the city. Let him know how much this blessed him or blessed you,
Mm,
of him just being real with his struggles and where he was and where he is now and where he is going to continue to grow. And
yeah.
man, just let him know. And man, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let's continue pointing real people to a real Jesus with a real love until Midland loves Jesus. See you guys.